Keya Nandi is a graduate student in applied economics at the University of Cincinnati, whose work centers on expanding access to global education, career opportunities, and student success. She recently led the development of an international student hiring database, compiling company level alumni employment information to help international students identify employers that have historically hired talent like them. In collaboration with the edtech platform InterStride, she uploaded and published the data, transforming it into an accessible tool that reduces ambiguity in international student job search and provides a strong starting point for students navigating complex employment landscapes. In addition to this project, Keya has mentored numerous students through study abroad, internship, and scholarship applications, supporting them with essay reviews, resume refinement, interview preparation, and overall application strategy. She has also helped students in her own community apply to universities abroad, offering guidance rooted in her personal experience navigating global education pathways. Keya has served as a peer career coach at UC and currently works as a graduate student assistant supporting student academics. Her contributions to UC's campus and the broader student community were recognized this year with the prestigious Presidential Leadership Medal of Excellence. Driven by a commitment to equity and accessible information, Keya hopes to continue empowering students to pursue global education with confidence and clarity. Welcome, Keya. It's so great to have you.
It's so good to be here. Thank you.
Yes, I'm super excited to be interviewing a fellow Bearcat. For those of you who may not know, I'm also a proud UC Bearcat for life, and so really excited to be interviewing you as our first student, not only from Ohio, but from UC, so I'm really excited. But just to start off, you've taken on several roles centered around increasing access to global education and career opportunities. So I'm curious to know what originally drew you into this work and how has your own experience navigating international education shaped the way that you support students today?
I think my interest in this area kind of goes back to my own experience, starting with, and I'll have to go back a little bit to my childhood. I was always really intrigued by the world, and so I think my idea of what my career would look like has changed a lot, but my hope to see the world and understand it better never has. And so since I was a kid, I always really wanted to travel. I wanted to understand how different places work, how different cultures worked, even how education was different in different places. Because when I was back in India, one of the things I struggle with is not really finding a fit for myself. I was always very good in academics, but I was also good at a lot of different things, especially extracurriculars, music, dance, all of that. And so when I came to high school, I started looking at different education systems around the world to find the one that fits me best. And while doing my research, I came across the US and UC and a few other universities, and I realized that the education system here matched my goals and my hopes for my career the best. And so I started applying, but when I started applying, that was the time when I started hearing a lot of things from friends and relatives saying that I was pretty stupid to think that I could go abroad without resources and being the first one in my family to do that. And so that really motivated me to go ahead and make them realize that that's not the case, and where you start doesn't have to define where you end up. And so I started applying. I was able to get a full scholarship here at UC, and that really reinstilled my belief that you don't have to have much to make something out of your life. And after coming to UC, I've been able to travel, I've been able to live abroad, study abroad in Ireland, work there, work in Germany. But I think the more I've traveled, the more I've realized I've grown not just in my personal capacity, but also the way I view professional problems. When I go into interviews, I'm a lot more confident because I've seen the way different people think and the way different people work. And now my goal is really to help students realize that the biggest barrier between them and their goal is really just the noise that they're going through. And honestly moving past that and ignoring that and realizing that my story is just like a little piece of like what is out there. And so that's really what I aim to do when I help students to transform their experiences and really make them realize that an international education is more accessible than they think. And yeah, so that my own personal experience has really driven the way I talk to different people, or the way I connect with different people, and be able to put myself in their shoes and really help them or give more personable advice. So.
Wow, I love that so much. Like, that is truly such an inspiring story and one that I resonate with so much, even though I wasn't an international student myself, like what you talk about, just that curiosity and that passion for just understanding the world around you, I think was a big motivating factor for me too. And so it's so fascinating to hear you frame it as well through the lens of global education. Like, that's not something you think about every day of how education systems across the world really operate so differently and can teach you different things. That's really awesome that you were able to find an education system that fit you the best and that you were able to take that leap and kind of block out the noise, because in doing so, you're able to use that experience and that knowledge to help others do the same. And that's what it's really all about, right? So that's awesome. And speaking of, your impact and what you've been able to do, I know one of your biggest recent projects has been developing an international student hiring database. So can you walk listeners through how that project started and what the process looked like for that?
Yeah, of course. So the project, first the idea for it came back in freshman year, so 4 years ago, when I went to my first career fair and realized that 95% of the employers there weren't hiring international students. And as I kind of looped through the career fair, I realized that almost every turn I took, I was hearing the same things, having employers say that we don't hire international students, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the thing that also it made me realize as I spoke to more people around me was that there was so little transparency on the companies that did hire international students, that people like me wasted so much of our time applying to companies that did not have that option open to us. So just as a fact out there, but I think for every one application that a domestic student does, an international student has to do 3 or 4 to have that same level of response rate. And that's not because maybe our skills aren't good or things like that. It's just because companies are not open about whether or not they're looking to hire international students, and that really creates a bit of an information gap for students like me then who apply to companies that are not really willing. Like I said, that's not a problem, but I think there was a big information gap there. And so I started researching about what different universities around the US were really doing to support their students, especially their international students, in terms of career success. And one of the things I noticed that UChicago, UPenn, and some of the other universities were doing was having access to a database that had hiring information from employers who've hired their past alumni. And knowing that UC was such a big co-op school and us not having that really made me realize that there was a big opportunity here to bring this new resource to campus. And so I spent 3 years trying to knock on a lot of doors, having sent a lot of emails, not really getting a lot of responses. But in my 4th year, I started working as a peer career coach on campus. And that was when I met Rebecca Hale, who's the international student career coach. And she really liked my idea. And so she started working with me, and she was the one who collaborated with the international office to collect the data, and then I was the one who worked on cleaning the data and making sure it was in the correct format to then upload it to InterStride. And now the database is out there, it's accessible to students. We're still trying to get the word out there because we started it this year, so there's still a lot of students who need to know about it, but that's kind of how it came into being.
That is such an incredible resource. Like, I'm just thinking, yeah, as you were explaining that, I'm thinking, yeah, UC is an enormous school, and so it's wild to think that, you know, that hadn't been thought of or, previously started by, you know, a group of students or an organization. So it's really cool to see that you were able to like identify that gap, and it seems like this was like a several year project. Like you said, it started freshman year, and you had like really worked on that throughout your whole college career with a lot of care and intention. Um, and so, just like a follow up to that question, and thinking about the database as this now like lasting tool that students can use, why is this kind of transparency so important for international students? And what impact do you hope this tool will have on students who are often navigating this confusing or opaque employment pathway?
So I think one of the biggest things that I feel that students are struggling with is the amount of time they're spending on these job applications. And if you think about it, when we start college in freshman year, there's so much of that race to get that first internship, and then the next one, and then the next one till you come to that full time stage. And so international students are really just spending their whole college career. 70% of that time is going just doing job applications because they don't even know what companies are okay with hiring them. And that was a big struggle that I faced as well. And so, what that is really doing is not just like taking away time from a lot of other things, but it's really taking away from that experience that they come here for, which is being involved in extracurriculars, being involved on campus, being able to do side projects and things they enjoy. And so it's taking away time from the things that really build up their skills and personality, because it's going into a job search they don't even know is coming to fruition or not. And so that's really my hope with the tool, is to give students a list of like companies that have hired our students in the past, and be able to have them realize that we do have contacts and we do have alumni who are currently in those spaces. So for me personally, it works as not just like a beacon of hope that, yeah, there have been so many students who have made it and crossed this like really hard stage in their life, but also just a place for me to go and say, okay, I was struggling to find even 5 roles that were willing to hire me, and now I have a list of like 1,000, 2,000 companies that have hired students in the past. And so that's a great starting point, and that cuts down the amount of time I'm spending by over 50%. And so I can use that same time and spend it into the things that really matter to me, whether it's giving back to the school, or being more engaged on campus, or really just building my own skills.
Absolutely. Time in college is so precious especially for students who are only, at UC specifically for 2 to 4 years. That time goes really quickly, and like you said, you want to be able to spend that on having a college experience. And of course, career readiness and applying for jobs is a big part of college. But even thinking to my own time, applying for jobs after graduation, like that was such a long process, and I applied for so many jobs. And so I'm just thinking for international students, when you brought up the figure of for every, one job a domestic student applies for, an international student should apply for or has to apply for 3 or 4. Like just thinking about that in the terms of how many jobs, students who are domestic have to apply for as well. Like thinking of that scaled for international students is just wow. So I totally hear what you're saying on how much time and how this tool really helps, students narrow down and not waste their time, applying for these jobs and getting all the way to a certain point and realizing, I can't even do this job. But I know beyond the database as well, you've mentored students through study abroad, scholarship applications, internships, and in even university admissions abroad. So from your perspective, What does meaningful mentorship look like to you? And what kinds of transformations or growth do you hope students walk away with after working with you?
So when I think about meaningful mentorship, I think about advice and mentorship that's personal. I have had a lot of mentors in my life, and the ones that have really stuck with me um, throughout my growth, throughout my college career, throughout everything, have been the ones I've been able to connect with on a more personal level. And I don't mean like connecting, like oversharing your story or trying to tell them your whole life story, but finding one thing that you and the other person can bond over. And so when I work with different students, my hope really is that even if they don't get anything out of a conversation with me, they at least leave with the hope that coming from where I came, I was still able to make so much out of my life without knowing and without having it all figured out. Just yesterday, I was working with a student, and one of the things she told me was that the reason that she really looks up to me is because she can relate to my story. And I think a lot of people don't realize mentorship doesn't mean just giving advice. It's also being honest about how there's this string of failures and rejections and no's before you get to that success, because especially on social media, LinkedIn, all of those things, it's really easy to see someone's success and be honestly scared and feel awkward to approach them. But if you're honest about how much it took to get to that success, people find it a lot more relatable, because 90% of the times there's a lot more people out there who are in that rough patch than there are people who are already past that and who are successful. And so my hope is to connect with those kinds of people who are really going through it at the moment, and be kind of beacon of hope for them to say, hey, like I went through it too and I got over it, so will you. And so being able to be personal is something that really matters to me, and that's how I approach mentorship as well. And when I think about how I would, or what I hope that students take away from when I talk to them, I think one of the things that I said previously here as well was how where you come from doesn't have to define where you end up. And so I get a lot of students who tell me, how did you do all of these cool things? And I said, I did it without knowing what I was doing. And that's 90% of the case every time you're doing something in life. It's all about shooting your shots and not really knowing where it's going to hit. And so even when students come and ask me, like, where do I apply for college? Like, how do I get a scholarship? I said, I don't know how it worked out. I just tried a lot, and I wrote a lot of emails, and I got a lot of no's, and one day something just clicked and it worked out. But unless you try and try and try again, like, you won't really know what works for you. And one of the other things I harp on again and again is to tell students to not be like me. And I know this sounds weird, but this is because I spent a good part of my college career trying to be like everyone else. I had like 3 or 4 people I really looked up to who I was like, I really want to be like this person. You included, actually. Freshman year, I was like, oh my god, I would love to be VP someday. There were a few people I looked up to, and I was like, I want to be like them. And the one thing I realized, that in pursuit of like following their path, I stopped being my own person, and I honestly did not have so much the success that I really hoped for, because it was for me, when I was going into my college career, I was like, oh, this is a tried and tested path that this person has gone through and has had success with, and so I'm going to do the same thing and I'm going to come out successful. But it really didn't work like that, because I realized that it didn't feel personal anymore. It didn't feel motivating anymore. And so when I talk to students, I always tell them, like, figure out what works for you, not what worked for me, because something that might be good for me might not be good for you. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to take the time to be able to think about what matters to you. And so yes, so I think the top 2 things that I really want students to get out of it is, of course, like, your resources don't have to define your end goal, and you don't have to shrink your dreams just because you're not sure how to get to them. And the second is, don't try to be like everyone else just because you think that's the tried and tested path to success.
Oh my gosh. Everything that you've said is just so profound, so powerful. Like I'm sitting here like with my mic muted. I'm like, "Yes." I just I couldn't agree more with everything you say. And I think that is so profound what you say about, sticking to this sense of uniqueness and individuality within your own leadership. That is what, to me, what college was about because, again, I resonate with so much of what you said. There were also, figures and leaders at UC during my time there as well that, I saw as like the blueprint. I'm like, I need to do everything this person did to get to their level of success. And, you know, I think you tie it in well to mentorship because that's truly where I think mentorship is crucial because you're still teaching these students, the core lessons of like what you experienced and what you went through without necessarily being like, do this, 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 and this, and you'll get there. You're very honest about, it looks different for everyone. Everyone's path looks different, but if you just remember these things, you can really interpret that and make of that what you want in your own unique way. And yeah, I just am so proud of, you and everything that you've been able to accomplish as well during your time at UC, which of course led you recently to be recognized by UC with the Presidential Leadership Medal of Excellence, which is incredible. It's our highest honor at UC. And so as you look ahead, what's next for you? I know that you're currently a grad student, but how do you hope to continue to expand access to global opportunities and shape more equitable systems for students?
As I mentioned, I think one of the big things that have really driven almost everything in my life is like access to good information, and that's kind of something I try to do every single day. Is like, even if I'm mentoring one person every other day and being able to tell them that like just because you can't find the information doesn't mean that it's not there and doesn't mean that it won't work out, is definitely like is my like personal feeling of sense of achievement. But actively I'm working on like building out resources. I thought about writing a book as well about my experiences, because I think a lot of people are really good at portraying how perfect they are, but not enough people are good at portraying how hard it can be to reach that one perfect moment in your life. And I think as I look at like building out maybe like workshops, I've looked into maybe starting some of my own workshops, having one-on-one sessions, not just in the UC community, but way beyond that too. Like reaching out to schools, reaching out to universities, and trying to do more in-person or virtual sessions where I can go in and kind of guide students through how they can approach their careers, how they can think about more of that international education piece. So I think, yes, mentorship will be one, but I think having a more structured approach to it through like workshops, events, things like that, speaking engagements. So I've been trying to do a lot of those to get the message out there. Then that's really what I hope to continue moving forward. I am currently trying to look for jobs as well, mostly in ed tech space, because that's where I feel like is something I personally care about a lot, and I think I'll make a lot of impact in. But where I once again, like I do believe that wherever I end up in terms of my job, I don't think that will really stop the momentum I've built in terms of helping out students get to where I am today. So.
Well, please write that book and please, I'll buy your first copy when you write that because I'm just so inspired after hearing, your story and what has motivated you to do the work and make the impact that you have on UC's campus. And, it's got me really thinking about where do I go from here too, I think I took a lot from what you said and like, framing your story in a more humanistic way, and not being like kind of, the LinkedIn post we see, of accomplishment after accomplishment, which is incredible, but I think it's just as equally important to highlight those challenges that you overcome along the way. And so I'm just thinking in my own life, it's just inspired me to want to be more transparent and share more about the details of the journey that I'm taking as well, and continuing to share that for others. I think that's the core of, mentorship, and just passing it forward, and, just lifting as you climb, because, everywhere that, you've been able to go, everywhere that I've been able to go, the opportunities that we've had have definitely been largely, individual accomplishments, but, with the help of our communities, I'm sure. And so it's just that essence of lifting as you climb, I think, is kind of this inspiring thing that I'm leaving this episode with. But from one Bearcat to another, thank you so much for joining me and just for sharing the incredible work that you're doing to expand global opportunities for students. I just think your commitment to equity and to student success just really shines through, and I'm just grateful that you took the time to speak with me today and be a part of this conversation. So thank you, Keya.
Of course, yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, that wraps up this week's episode of the Student Impact Report. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at SBNC_USA. And you can also catch our episodes on Spotify and YouTube. See you next time.